While never portrayed in canon, the Kamino Uprising is one of the biggest Legends events involving the clones. It takes place in the ocean world of Kamino, where the clones were bred and born. It was their home, where they spent their entire lives training to go to war against the Separatists. But despite Kamino's service during the war, the Empire no longer trusted its suppliers. In turn, the Kaminoans also lost faith in the Empire. Inside the platforms of Tipoca City, a small circle of Kaminoan elites, known as the Clone Masters, refused to let their legacy be turned into another Imperial instrument. In secret, they began growing a new generation of soldiers. Clones engineered not to serve the Empire, but to fight it. These clones, clad in the old Phase 1 armor, became known as anti-Imperial troopers. As the Empire fortified its presence on Kamino, the conflict finally ignited. Imperial High Command deployed elements of the 501st Legion to quell the uprising, supported by none other than the bounty hunter Boba Fett, a man who was raised in these very halls and molded after the clones. Fett led the charge and went into the facility first, carving through the rogue clones. He was tasked with securing the last viable sample of Jango Fett's genetic template before the Clone Masters could use it to grow a larger anti-Imperial army. After breaching the lockdown systems and cutting through the defenders, Fett reached the cloning vaults, seized the DNA template, and sent it off-world aboard a waiting transport. But Fett's mission was not finished. To ensure no further clones could ever be grown against Imperial rule, he descended into the lower cloning centers and destroyed their life support infrastructure. The vats went dark. The uprising's future died with them. Above, the battle raged across Kamino's walkways as stormtroopers of the 501st clashed against their renegade brothers. When Fett rejoined the front line, the remaining anti-Imperial units were already falling back toward the landing pads. Their last stand did not last long, as the Clone Masters attempted to flee aboard two Lat-Es, but Imperial shock troopers fired rockets, which brought both transports down, ending the Kamino Uprising. In the aftermath, Kamino was fully subsumed into Imperial authority. The surviving Kaminoan instigators were arrested and later transported to the Death Star, where they would perish during the prison revolt that erupted there. Though the Kamino Uprising had failed, it left a mark on Palpatine's thinking. If an army bred from a single template could turn against its master, then that template was a liability. In response, Palpatine ordered a restructuring of the Imperial military. New clones would be grown from a wide array of genetic sources, and increasing numbers of birth-born recruits would join the Stormtrooper Corps. Soon after the events of Order 66 and the rise of the Empire, Ryloth had turned from one occupation by the Separatists into another one by the Empire. Its people had fought hard in the Clone Wars, with the leadership of freedom fighter Cham Syndulla inspiring the Twi'leks against the Separatists before finally succeeding alongside the Republic. Captain Howzer, a clone trooper who transitioned successfully as a stormtrooper during the Imperial era, was the clone commander assigned to guard Ryloth's capital. He was not a stranger to Ryloth and its leaders. During the war, he served beside Cham in his resistance, and he earned respect for them in the field. After Cham Syndulla was framed for an attack on Orn Free Taa, the senator of Ryloth, and put in prison, Howzer was left no choice but watch idly by as Rampart kept tightening his grip and ordered him to even arrest Twi'leks just for being involved with Cham. Howzer didn't understand this move if he knew fully well that these Twi'leks he was ordered to arrest weren't insurgents but normal people. Meanwhile, there was a search going on for Hera, Cham's daughter, who was absent when her parents got imprisoned. As the search for Hera widens, Howzer sees just how far Rampart was willing to go to imprison innocents. Despite trying his best to argue against it, Rampart simply told him to stick to his orders. Howzer still believed he could help, though, secretly going to Cham's prison cell and trying to find out Hera's location, as he genuinely wanted to protect her. But Cham refused, as he no longer trusted the clone who had once sworn to protect them. Cham was eventually rescued by the Bad Batch, but the Empire was ready, having set a trap to arrest the Bad Batch and the rogue Twi'leks. Howzer, though, finally decided that enough was enough and confronted Cham and the Bad Batch. He warned them about the Empire's trap and apologized for not having spoken out against the Empire sooner. Then he went out and confronted the clones that were ordered to arrest Cham yet again. He tried to reason with them that the Empire was not doing what's best for Ryloth and that they had sworn to protect it. His speech manages to convince 6 other clones to join his side. He was arrested right after that, but still, Howzer was one of the first clones to openly stand up and speak against the Empire, showing that clones would no longer just willfully stand by and advance the Empire's tyranny. The story about the 501st Mutiny begins when Anakin Skywalker leads them into the dark, fog-soaked world of Umbara against the hostile Separatist forces. Before the troops settle in, Anakin is recalled to Coruscant. As such, command passes to Jedi General Pong Krell, a towering basilisk with a rather bad reputation. He was known to be cruel to clones, believing them to be completely disposable. Krell often used tactics that involved sacrificing clone troopers to complete missions. From the First Orders, Krell treats the clones of the 501st like disposable assets. He forbids their customized tactics and demands head-on assaults against fortified positions. With such circumstances, casualties began to pile up, and the morale of the 501st drops. Due to Krell's tactics, Rex had to try to balance his obedience toward the Jedi General while also showing care and support for his man. It was a delicate balance that became increasingly difficult to maintain as the mission unfolded. While clones like Fives and Jesse voice their doubts openly, others, like Dogma, cling to the chain of command and accuse their brothers of disloyalty. As tension grew, Krell punishes the dissenting clones and doubles down on his frontal charges with a high death toll. He dismisses the value of reconnaissance and refuses to adapt to Umbaran technology. With that, the Jedi's tactics proved to be effective as the 501st took the capital of Umbara despite heavy losses. But when Krell orders a direct push on a supply hub, Fives argues for using captured Umbaran starfighters. Krell rejects the idea though. Still, Fives, Jesse, and Hardcase steal the fighters anyway, and thus defy Krell's direct orders to keep the Umbaran fighters grounded. They fly a risky strike that targets a Separatist supply ship in orbit. The mission succeeds because of Hardcase's sacrifice, but on their return, Fives and Jesse are arrested. Krell demands their execution for insubordination. Through his efforts, however, Rex delays the sentence while trying to keep the unit from tearing itself apart. The darkest blow lands when Krell manipulates the 501st into fighting fellow clones. Through garbled codes and false intel, each unit believes the other is an Umbaran unit wearing stolen clone armor. Rex recognizes the truth mid-battle and rips off a helmet to stop the shooting. The survivors stare at each other in horror as they realize what they've done. This breaks whatever trust remained. Rex confronts Krell about his deliberate sabotage. Krell then makes a run for it, cutting down troopers with his twin sabers and charges through the jungle, mowing through squads and dominating the field like a one-man army. Eventually, the clones manage to stun the rogue Jedi through teamwork eventually. In custody, Krell finally reveals his motive. He has sensed that the Jedi and the Republic will lose their way and that the Sith will rise. He plans to join Count Dooku and wants a record of decisive victories to present as proof of value. The chaos and the friendly fire incident were part of his plan to break the clones and deliver Umbara to the Separatists. In doing so, he hoped to attract Dooku's attention, wanting to be his Sith apprentice. However, Dogma, who had defended Krell at every turn, realizes he was used. In Krell's cell, Dogma shoots Krell and ends him for good. The Bad Batch, formerly known as Clone Force 99, arrived on Kaller as the Clone War neared its last hours. The squad had a record of unorthodox tactics that worked. The original members, Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, and Crosshair, had unique genetics that made them different, allowing them to specialize in certain fields. Meanwhile, Echo, who was once a regular clone, had been turned into a walking terminal by the Separatists during his brief time as a captive. The Bad Batch were on their way to reinforce Jedi Master Depa Billaba and her Padawan, Caleb Doom, on the planet Kaller. After their arrival, the momentum of the battle changed instantly as they managed to push through the droid forces. However, after defeating the Separatists, Order 66 is enacted. Across the galaxy, soldiers who had fought beside the Jedi pivoted and opened fire. Billaba managed to sense it just in time and started defending herself against the blaster bolts, but she knew it was futile. Seeing Caleb running towards her, she screamed at him to run before being killed. But unlike the rest of the regular clones, the Bad Batch did not react to the order. Their genetic deviations that made them exceptional also dulled the chip's control. Thus, they didn't adhere to Order 66, unlike all the other clones. Hunter was utterly confused at the sight of the regs executing the Jedi, while Tech and Wrecker seemed to act similarly. Echo as well, due to his cybernetic reconstruction, felt nothing of the chip's influence. The only one who seemed to somewhat react was Crosshair, although it seemed to be a partial compliance toward the order rather than a full-on one. Caleb, meanwhile, had fled into the forest. Hunter, in an attempt to help the Jedi, followed after him alongside Crosshair. But unbeknownst to Hunter, Crosshair was obliging toward the order and started to open fire on the Jedi. Hunter tried to stop him while speaking to Caleb that he wanted to help him, but Caleb didn't trust him, knocked out Crosshair, and ran deeper into the forest. Hunter gave chase and found Caleb again near a ravine, who once again tried to convince the Jedi to stay and let him help. But Caleb refused yet again, jumped across the ravine, and disappeared into the forest. Hunter went on to report that he had shot the Jedi so the clones would stop searching for him. After the events on Collar, they returned to Kamino. Crosshair remained unconvinced by Hunter's account of the Padawan's fate, and his suspicions simmered beneath the surface. When their ship finally descended onto the rain-soaked platforms of Kamino, the squad expected their normal routines, but instead found the entire facility humming with unusual activity. A shock trooper quartermaster greeted them coldly and informed them that the Clone Wars were over. The squad retreated to their barracks, unsettled by the revelation and by the compliant behavior of their regs, who had accepted Order 66 without hesitation. Tech began piecing together the information, confirming that the directive they had received on Collar had been a command to execute the Jedi for treason, something none of them, except Crosshair, had even attempted to follow. Their mutations had dulled the chip's influence, sparing them from the blind obedience gripping the rest of the clone army. In the midst of this uncertainty, the squad encountered Omega, a mysterious child who somehow knew each of them by name. She watched them with curiosity, sensing the tension within their ranks. Then, Admiral Tarkin arrived on Kamino to evaluate the clones and placed Clone Force 99 through a combat trial. Their unorthodox methods and independence irritated him, and it became clear he saw little use for clones who questioned any of his order as they did with Order 66. The squad was soon sent on what was described as a mission to eliminate a surviving separatist cell, but it turned out to be a camp of refugees under Saw Gerrera. Hunter refused to carry out the order, choosing to show compassion as he wouldn't just gun down and execute unarmed civilians. And that moment confirmed the widening rift between the Bad Batch and the new Imperial regime. Crosshair, increasingly irritable and more rigid in his loyalty toward the Order, clashed with Hunter over the decision. Upon returning to Kamino, the Bad Batch were arrested for insubordination, but they did escape and took Omega with them. Hunter offered her a place among them, sensing that she didn't belong under the Empire's control. She accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Crosshair's behavior drew the attention of Tarkin. His inhibitor chip, already the most functional among the squad, was deliberately amplified. The adjustment pushed him fully into compliance, erasing the doubts he once held and aligning him completely with Imperial doctrine. With his altered loyalty, he turned on his former squad mates, choosing to remain with the Empire and branding Clone Force 99 as traitors in his eyes. The Bad Batch fled Kamino without him, devastated by the loss but still more than certain that they couldn't have stayed in service of the Empire. Their rejection of Order 66 had set them on a new trajectory, one that would put them at odds with every system of control the Empire sought to impose, and they now were enemies in the eyes of the Empire. From there on, they'd keep defying the Empire and would ultimately be the culprit for the biggest clone rebellion in the history of the galaxy. Project War Mantle is the Empire's plan to replace clone soldiers with recruited humans called TK Troopers. To make the switch work, Imperial Brass drafted elite clone commandos to act as instructors inside hidden facilities. One of those facilities was on the planet Darrow. Gregor was a veteran clone commando from the Clone Wars. When the Republic became the Empire, he found himself ordered to train new conscripted recruits who wore shiny new armor and answered to TK numbers. At first, it might look like a routine assignment for an experienced soldier. Very quickly, he realizes the truth, that the Empire is phasing out clones altogether. The goal is not an efficient army, but an obedient one that costs half the price of cloning. At the base, Gregor notices a ton of contempt toward clones who built the Empire's army in the first place. He decided that enough is enough and searched for a way out, deciding he'd not contribute to a system that aimed to make his brothers obsolete. To defy the Empire, he decides to run for it through the forest, but is caught in the process. But help soon arrived when Captain Rex sent the Bad Batch to extract him from the base. The Bad Batch infiltrate the station and rescue Gregor. Despite Gregor getting shot in the escape process, he eventually links up with Rex's underground movement. Crosshair was the Bad Batch's black sheep, a cold-natured clone who was more receptive to the Empire's orders and dogmatic approach. The other members of the Batch believed this was the inhibitor chip's doing, but it was clear that Crosshair's personality simply made him more likely to adhere to the Empire's new ideals, all while the other members of the Batch openly rebelled against the New Order. In turn, Crosshair had resumed his post as a trooper within the Empire, even clashing with his brothers a few times. However, despite working for the Empire, Crosshair's experiences, including the Imperial harshness toward civilians and clones alike, forced him to question his loyalty. He was forced to face his brothers multiple times, making him wonder whether or not it was correct for him to align himself with the Imperial dogma. Earlier, he told his former squad that he had choices, and it was his personal freedom that made him choose the Empire. Still, there were several events that made it clear his choices were wrong. The breaking point came at the Barton 4 outpost. He is reassigned under Lieutenant Nolan to a frozen backwater where several clones have guarded cargo for months without any backup and having their gear falling apart. The clone commander of the outpost, Commander Mayday, still seems sympathetic, though, despite the harsh treatment. But Lieutenant Nolan treated the clones like disposable tools, sending Crosshair and Mayday to recover some random stolen crates despite being severely outnumbered and there being a blizzard outside. While tracking the thieves, the two veterans talk. Mayday needles Crosshair about loyalty to an empire that will not even replace a helmet. Crosshair's answers are clipped. He says a soldier follows orders, but Mayday replies that orders should mean something. They find the raider camp inside an ice cave, leading to a close and chaotic fight. Explosives trigger a collapse that buries them, with Mayday badly hurt. Crosshair could leave to save himself, which fits the cold persona he has lived by since turning on his squad. Instead, he refuses to abandon Mayday. He frees him from the snow and drags him mile after mile through the blizzard. By the time they reach the outpost at dawn, both are near death. The crates they found out contain prototype stormtrooper armor. This truth had hit Crosshair hard. The clones on the outpost had spent months dying to protect the gear that would eventually replace them and weren't even given the new gear and were forced to keep wearing the worn clone armors. Pleading to Nolan to help Mayday and save him, he gets met with all but a distant and disgusted look from the lieutenant. Nolan refused any help to a clone. Mayday dies and Crosshair snaps. Crosshair realizes the Empire does not value his skill or his loyalty. It never did. It values the next body that can hold a rifle. He raises his pistol and shoots Nolan. He then collapses from exposure and blood loss. This was a turning point in Crosshair's eventual return to his old squad, reprising his role as the Bad Batch's resident sniper. In the shadow of the rising Imperial war machine, Captain Rex founded a covert resistance network, the Clone Underground Resistance Movement. What began as a small attempt to help brothers who felt something was wrong with the new regime soon grew into a full-fledged movement dedicated to saving disillusioned clones and to keep fighting for the ideals of the Republic they once served. By the first months of Imperial rule, Rex and the clones who joined him operated from the fringes of known space, using hidden outposts and a salvaged ship called the Remora. The vessel carried a detachable leech pod that allowed them to slip onto Imperial craft unnoticed. The Clone Underground later captured several Rho-class shuttles as well, expanding their reach across contested systems. Their main refuge was deep within the ruins of an abandoned Bomar Order monastery on the remote world of Teth, with a small repair shop on Coruscant serving as their quiet foothold in the heart of the Empire. Rex himself led the movement, joined by fellow veterans such as Gregor, Howzer, Fireball, Nemec, and others who refused to let the Empire erase who they were. Echo, having left Clone Force 99 following the passage of the Defense Recruitment Bill, added his expertise to their cause, and the Underground even found a political ally inside the Imperial Senate, Rio Chuchi, who risked everything to speak for clone rights. Slip, an Imperial trooper who uncovered the truth about cloning operations, acted as an informant until his death. Over time, their efforts saved numerous brothers, including later members like Gregor, Howzer, Fireball, and others who had vanished into hidden Imperial prisons. Their missions were dangerous, and many barely ended in success. During a rescue operation above Balmora, the Remora disabled an Imperial cruiser's hyperdrive, allowing Echo, Gregor, and Nemec to breach the hull, free imprisoned clones, and escape only moments before reinforcements arrived. Later on Pantora, Rex and his team attempted to safeguard Senators Chuchi and Avi Singh during a clandestine meeting, only to be ambushed by a deadly Clone X assassin. After a chaotic chase through the Undercity, the Underground managed to capture the operative alive. He became their only lead to discovering the location of Tantus Base, the secret Imperial facility where countless clones were being held. The Underground brought the assassin back to their monastery hideout on Teth, but the interrogation yielded nothing. Before they could learn more, a second Clone X infiltrator arrived. What followed became a massacre. The assassin tore through their defenses and killed Fireball, Nimic, Samson, and several others, forcing Rex, Howzer, and the remaining survivors to flee into the jungle alongside Clone Force 99, who had been temporarily assisting them. There, the fleeing clones were cornered by a recovery strike team led by Wolf. Rex pleaded with his old friend, reminding him of the brothers they had lost and the ideals they once shared. Wolf hesitated, long enough to order his troops to stand down. As a final act of loyalty to his kind, he allowed them to escape aboard the Remora. As the Empire tightened its grip, Rex and Echo continued the fight, ultimately infiltrating Imperial Station 03 alongside the disgraced former Vice Admiral Rampart. The risk paid off. They secured passage aboard a science vessel bound for Wayland, the planet that housed Tantus Base. Echo slipped into the facility disguised as a stormtrooper, where he encountered Emery Carr, a clone scientist who had come to doubt the Empire she served. With her help, Clone Force 99 confronted Dr. Hemlock, destroyed the remaining Clone X operatives, and liberated the imprisoned clones and Force-sensitive children held there, thus dealing a huge blow to the Empire. It was definitely the most successful clone rebellion that was depicted in canon till that point. When Clone Trooper Tup suddenly killed a Jedi willingly without any orders, a lot of questions started to be raised. ARC Trooper Fives being one of the more vocal people to question Tup's actions. His research eventually gets him to Kamino, where he, alongside the droid AZ-3, learns that every clone carries an inhibitor chip. Although the Kaminoans claim the chip is a safeguard against aggression, Fives realizes it is the source of Tup's breakdown. He decides the truth must reach Coruscant, believing that this information could potentially change the future. On the other hand, the Kaminoans brand him unstable and send him to Coruscant for evaluation. Fives gets put in a private audience with Chancellor Palpatine, who wanted to hear what Fives had to say, but unbeknownst to Fives, the Chancellor had laid out a trap for him. Palpatine decided to make Fives aware that the entire clone army was set up to wipe out the Jedi. He snaps and attacks the Chancellor before being intercepted. Then he staggers out and was forth on, accused of trying to kill the Chancellor, and the Coruscant Guard launches a planet-wide search. He was now an enemy of the Republic. Left with no choice, Fives turns to the two people he trusts most, Anakin Skywalker and Captain Rex, as they have fought with him for years. With the help of his friend, a fellow clone named Kix, he set up a meeting with Anakin and Rex. To Fives' surprise, Anakin and Rex arrive with the squad as he steps out with his hands open and delivers the truth as calmly as he can. He asks for a scan that will show the missing chip. He even says that the Chancellor sits at the center of the plan. Anakin, however, accuses the clone of trying to assassinate the Chancellor, as Skywalker was known for his growing relationship with the Republic's leader. Fives tries his best to explain his side while tensions rise. His pleas fell on Skywalker's deaf ears. Rex, however, seemingly keeps an open mind and ear. Meanwhile, Commander Fox moves to close the net. In no time, troopers march into the area. A bolt fires in the confusion and strikes Fives, who collapses to the cold floor. Rex cradles his friend and comrade as Fives' life slips away. The dying clone says he only ever wanted to do his duty. He dies before he can name the Sith guiding the scheme. The Guard reports a dangerous rogue neutralized, reassuring the Chancellor that his secret plot stays a secret. Afterward, the record shows tidy conclusions that kept the hidden plot far from Jedi suspicion. The Kaminoans submit reports that defend the chip as a behavioral control feature. In turn, the Jedi accept a narrative of stress and breakdown and return to a war that could have been approached differently had they listened to Fives' pleas. The Clone Wars were nearing their end, and Ahsoka Tano had just returned from Mandalore following her successful campaign against the captured Darth Maul. The members of the 332nd Company, who showed incredible loyalty toward her during the mission, were on board the Tribunal Venator-class Star Destroyer as they were on their way back to Coruscant with the former Sith Lord in their custody. Suddenly, the Chancellor initiates Order 66. Captain Rex receives the order directly, trembles under the weight of it, and struggles with his loyalty toward Ahsoka. He still tries to warn her with a fractured plea to find Fives, as he was aware that this must be the symptom of the thing Fives uncovered. Ahsoka manages to escape the initial assault against her. With help from the astromech R7A7 and 2 service droids, Ahsoka manages to capture Rex and bring him to a medbay. There, she uses the Force to locate the inhibitor chip in his head, using Rex's plea to find Fives as her clue. Ahsoka knew about the chip, but was yet to be sure about what it was. After removing the chip, Rex wakes up and is devastated. He confirms that every clone aboard has the same device, and that the order cannot be appealed. There's no path to reason with the crew because the chip's effects were far too powerful, and their minds completely overwritten by the command. Ahsoka, who harbored loyalty sentiments toward the clones of the 332nd, was still unwilling to take the lives of her comrades. However, still they had to find an escape. The duo maneuvers toward the hangar where escape crafts are kept. In the main hangar, ARC Trooper Jesse blocks their route with rows of troopers. They fight their way out of it at the last moment as the Venator was about to crash down onto the surface after being damaged in hyperspace. The entire crew was killed except for Rex and Ahsoka.